I am Ben Doc Askins, the Psychedelic Science War storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's up, all you anti-heroes out there? Doc Askins coming at you with another one of these Q5 podcasts that I know you can't get enough of, where I ask 5 of my favorite questions that I use in my ketamine-assisted therapy practice, and I present them to some of the people that I think are cool out there. And the cool person I've got on the pod today is former Navy FA-18 Hornet fighter pilot, Wall Street executive, Top Gun grad, and founder of No Fallen Heroes Foundation, Matthew Whiz Buckley. Welcome onto the podcast today, my friend.
Thanks, Doc. Nice to be here, man. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your story and share it with whoever's tuning in to listen at this point.
Yeah, well, if they're suffering from insomnia, I'll help them out.
We'll do what we can for everybody out there.
Exactly.
We'll try to address both ADHD and insomnia today if we can. All right.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's get rocking and rolling then with question number 1. What's your story, brother?
Man, the executive summary version, man. I was born and raised in South Philly, South Jersey, the real Jersey Shore, not the MTV one. One of
Jim
6
Tan
kids.
Laundry wasn't the thing.
Exactly. GTL. Yeah, a stereotypical Irish Catholic family, 6 kids, raised, service above self and to give something back to the country. So I knew at a younger age I wanted to join the military, lived on the beach, loved the ocean. And, my best friend growing up across the street, his dad was larger than life. His dad flew F-106 fighter jets for the New Jersey Air National Guard. And he was just the coolest guy in the world, flight suit and a Trans Am and all that stuff. So, beach, fighter jet, ocean. I said, all right, I want to fly jets for the Navy. So hopped in the car, went down to Jacksonville University down here in Florida, met my beautiful bride, my college sweetheart, and busted my rear end because Murphy was an aviator in '86. The original Top Gun came out, and I'm like, well, that's just great. Now everybody wants to fly jets for the Navy. So I had to work even harder, right? So got to Pensacola for flight training, busted my ass, and got selected for jets. Went to beautiful Kingsville, Texas. If you think Corpus Christi is bad,
A lot of kings living in Kingsville, yeah.
Oh yeah, man. The King Ranch is down there in Kingsville. But yeah, so. And again, you had to bust my ass again because not only does the Navy have a lot of jets, there's different types of jets. So I wanted to fly the newest fighter at the time, which was the F-18 Hornet. So I kind of busted my ass and got selected for F-18s and then was based out in California, out in Lamora, California in the Central Valley, kind of an armpit of California. And I did 2 deployments over to the Persian Gulf on board Abraham Lincoln. And then my second deployment was on board Kitty Hawk and did Operation Southern Watch, no-fly zone missions, which were technically combat sorties, but without a doubt the most boring flying I've ever done in my life. In the year 2000, like a moron, like a lemming following all the other dudes out the door, went to go be a rich airline pilot. And completely different long story we can talk about some other time. The morning of September 11th, I was getting ready for my first flight as a pilot for American Airlines in Fort Worth. So saw the attacks happening. I raced out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth because I was flying F-18s for a reserve squadron out there. So got with the F-16 guys next door. And we briefed to get airborne and fly a combat air patrol over the United States. They actually got airborne first because they're Air Force guys with more money and missiles, and they're used to this type of stuff. So me and my buddy Gruff sat at the end of the runway with the engines turning, armed up and ready to go. I tell that because, a week after the attacks, I got a photocopied letter from American Airlines HR saying I was furloughed, which is, airline speak for laid off. So laid off. And, I had been trading. I taught myself on active duty how to trade options and stocks kind of in the background, because you don't join the military to get rich, clearly. So I,
Right.
kind of
It's for the
was
food.
trading in the background. Yeah, exactly. So now that I lost my airline career, I started trading full time to pay the bills. Thankfully, our reserve squadron got a lot of money because we ended up getting mobilized for Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I could reserve bump, but still I needed to make a little bit more money. So, man, I popped up on the radar of one of the largest volatility arbitrage options trading firms in the world, headquartered in the Chicago Board of Trade. And they said, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, trading is a form of combat, right? Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to get their ass handed to them. So I've just been using everything I learned flying a fighter jet to my trading, and it kind of works pretty well." They're like, they went mafia on me. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They,
It's Chicago style.
they put a number on a napkin and slid it over to me like, why don't you come to Chicago? I'm like, done. So I went up to Chicago.
That's a lot of zeros.
It was it's more zero than I've ever seen in my life. So I went up there with my bride and my two boys, and then my daughter was born up there in Chicago. No offense to anybody from the Midwest, but you can keep it. I'm a Navy guy. I need a beach and warmth, and Lake Michigan doesn't count as a beach. So I did that for about
some white sand there. They'll tell you all about the white sand on Lake Michigan, right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to go swimming where like the Edmund Fitzgerald sank. So after about 3 years of doing that, my wife, my bride is from Boca Raton, Florida. So I just said, you know what, let's go down there. I'm pretty damn sure I can do this on my own. So I built a company called TOPGUN Options, where I teach people how to trade options. I do live trade briefs throughout the week. But about 2 years ago, shameless plug, I wrote a book called COVID Crash, because I predicted the COVID market crash to the day, man. You couldn't
really.
God takes care of fools, drunks, and sailors. So I'm bases loaded for Whiz. But I remember it was I think it was January 22nd. I'll never forget this, because all the beautiful people, once a year they meet in Davos, right? And it was the January, they were all over in Davos, and Donald Trump was getting interviewed by what's his name, Joe Kiernan, and it was like the end of the interview. It was like a throwaway question. It was like, "Hey, Mr. President, before you go, what's this China bug or flu coming? What?" He's like, "Dumb question, Joe. Why are you even asking me that? I trust Xi. He's a good dude, good backswing. Been to Mar-a-Lago. I love him. That's a dumb question. Not coming here." Well, I had a buddy. I had a deep throat in D.C. He's like, "Dude, complete fucking lie. It's coming here. It's bad, right?" And like, there was a couple U.S. senators that got the same kind of briefing I got from a buddy who went out to microphones and said, "What? Not coming here, remain calm." And they picked up their cell phone and they called their brokers and got out, and they told all their best friends to get out. And of course, they never got. We did an investigation, and that's not insider trading. Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
I did outsider trading. I told everybody who would listen, I'm like, it's coming. Buy puts on the S&P 500, get long volatility. Yeah. We're in a lot of trouble. And we literally made millionaires, little old ladies in tennis shoes, filthy rich. I'm telling you this because, I'm not big at quoting scripture, but I can at least do this one half-assed. It'll be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So I made a shit pot of money. And I'm like, you know what, man? Veterans. I lost his picture's right over there. A groomsman in my wedding, Captain Eric Swenson, Swede. Beautiful wife, 5 kids, put a bullet in his head. And I also lost 2 other buddy F-18 brothers to suicide. I'm like, dude, veteran suicide. Back then, I think the number was like 17 a day, right?
Yeah.
Then that kind of creeped up to 22. Oh, and by the way, last year, a couple small colleges, Duke University and the University of Alabama, went and actually dug into Uncle Sam's numbers. And it turns out that Uncle Sam's only counting like violent suicides. They ain't counting people drinking themselves to death or drugs.
Yeah.
So they said 44. It's closer to 44. We're going to run out of veterans. So let me backtrack. In 2020, I'm like, you got a shitload of money, do something, Whiz. So I got to do something. Started a foundation called Top Gun Fighter Foundation, because it's a very small marketing department. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I don't know, help write resumes, help buy suits. I had no clue what I was going to do. And then a buddy of mine's like, hey, man, I heard about these like Navy SEALs and Special Forces dudes that go to Mexico and they do psychedelic assisted therapy. And I'm like, what? And then the one guy's like, yeah, there's a good group going in a couple weeks. You should go with them. I'm like, going to Mexico to do drugs with Navy SEALs for a weekend? Sign me up, man. That sounds like
it's like a Sons of Anarchy episode waiting to happen. Yeah, sure.
I'm like, you can count me. Yeah, I'm in. Man, I had no fucking idea what I was getting into, man. So it ended up being a pretty cool, eclectic group. It was Marcus Luttrell. Obviously, most of your listeners and viewers know The Lone Survivor, right? Either the book or the movie with Mark Wahlberg. So Marcus Luttrell, and then Jared Taylor, JT, one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee. Another veteran Navy SEAL, and then an NFL player. This guy was a 4-year All-American at Iowa, and then 8 years, I think, at the Raiders. Just horrific CTE, right?
Sure.
So, man, we drove down to Mexico, and I'll give you we can dig into this a little more if you want, but it was without a doubt the most, I got 30, 40 years of therapy in a weekend. I forgot to tell you, as a kid, that stereotypical Irish Catholic family. I was an altar boy in Catholic school, and my older brother, and 2 of my sisters were all at Villanova University together. And my sister Monica was a freshman, and all 3 of them were at a fraternity party. And my brother John and my sister Marilyn said, hey, Monica, we're going back to campus. Are you coming with us? And she said, no, I'm going to go with these folks. Well, those folks drove drunk. They blew a stop sign. Their car was hit, and my sister was thrown from the car and broke her neck and was killed.
Oh, wow.
So that was just, and
I'm
I was
sorry,
getting
brother.
ready to go into high school. No, well, guess what? I am healed, right? Because that was a hand grenade, man. That destroyed my family. She was right in the middle and gone. My dad, he never smiled again. I remember when I had kids, I remember sitting with him one night looking at my kids running around, and I'm like, Dad, how did you, after Monica died, he knew what the question was coming. He just looked at me. He said, I had you. He said, I had you guys.
Oh, wow.
He said, when they lowered her into the ground, I wanted to jump in with her. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in high school, high school's tough enough for a young man, let alone losing your parents technically and your sister. So I played sports, and I'd miss the bus in the afternoon. So my dad would pick me up sometimes, and in between St. Augustine Prep and our home was the cemetery, and he stopped every day, and he got out of that car and he cried every day.
Wow.
And it was brutal, right? I bring this up because, and then he died at 65. Strong as an ox. He died of a broken heart, right? I bring this up because laying on my back in Mexico, man, there's my dad and there's my sister. And they could not have looked more happy. They were perfect. They were absolutely angelic, right?
Yeah.
And pixelated is a bad word, but I'm looking at them and I feel I've never felt better in my life. And they pixelated, or they kind of drifted away. And I started yelling. I'm like, don't leave me. Don't leave again. And they came back and they looked at me and they smiled and they started to go away again. And then I followed them and they went into everything. They went into my daughter. They went into the trees. They went into the sunset, and I was at peace. They never left. They were right here. And right here on this podcast. And man, it was the most, and I'll spare you the rest of it, but it was the most spiritual, healing, cleansing experience of my life.
Yeah.
I got home and I said, this is the way. This is what we're going to do to heal veterans. So I changed the name because Top Gun Fighter Foundation's a little maverick centric, so I changed it to the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, man. Okay. So we provide healing grants for veterans, first responders, because a lot of people leave the military. They hang up one uniform, they put on another one, and they don't clean up any of their traumas, and they get more being a first responder. I have a buddy who's a 20-year Marine, who went to Miami-Dade, kind of down south, fire rescue. He's like, dude, I saw it was worse being in fire rescue than ever as a Marine. And their families. So we provide healing grants to these folks to go do psychedelic assisted therapy. We currently, Costa Rica. I went to a place called the Mission Within, just south of San Diego, right? You do it in San Diego, you're a felon. You hop in your car and drive an hour south. You save your life. So we go to the Mission Within in northern Mexico, and also a place called Ambio. And then we also use a place called Awaken Your Soul down in Costa Rica. And down in Costa Rica, we do Iboga, which is the actual root. At the Mission Within, we do Ibogaine, which is a derivative of Iboga. And then I'll make a formal announcement today. What's today's date? In a month from now, we will be doing our first healing retreat in the United States, in Colorado, because it's, thank you, Oregon, thank you, Colorado. They are blazing the path, and it is legal, at least at a state level, in those states. So we're going to be doing our.
What's the date on that?
Last weekend in October, like 25 to whatever Thursday through Monday would be the last weekend in October. I mean, because it makes me furious that we have people who endured significant trauma serving this nation, and we have to go to another country to potentially heal this trauma. It's just an absolute disgrace. So it's time to heal our heroes at home. So that's what we're doing at the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. And obviously we're advocating, right? I jump on a plane. Seems like all far too often to fly up to Washington and shake hands and kiss babies. Thankfully, Morgan Luttrell, Congressman Morgan Luttrell, also a Navy SEAL. Marcus, his brother is Marcus Luttrell. So
they look
Morgan,
a lot alike.
They do. I when I finally met Morgan for the first time, I'm like, it looks like your mom hiccuped, and two, you guys popped out. One of the nicest guys I've ever met, just like his brother. But he's a congressman now, but he did the medicine. So he's a veteran. He's on Capitol Hill, and he can sit there and say, hey, man, I did this. Dan Crenshaw hasn't done the medicine yet, but he's buddies with all the guys. And then Ryan Zinke, Congressman Zinke, is also a former Navy SEAL. So we got Navy SEALs in Congress starting to lead the way. It's really interesting that, I saw this headline a couple months ago, Crenshaw and AOC. I'm like, oh my God, I can't read the rest of that headline. What's it? They killed each other or something? Crenshaw and AOC agree on this. I'm like, anytime you can get a Crenshaw or an AOC agreeing on something, it probably is a freaking fantastic idea to do. So the Democrats are already there. Guys like me are having to pull Republicans, because I'll talk to Republicans who are like, isn't it like weed? And, because people, for better or worse, see cannabis as what? Recreational, right? You're preaching to the choir about its medicinal use, is what I'm saying, is in the public eye, right? So a lot of congressmen sit there like, and I'll look at them, I'm like, dude, there was nothing recreational about my weekend in Mexico, man. You aren't taking Ibogaine and going out in a club. You ain't going anywhere for a half a day to a day. So these healing medicines are not recreational, and they can be one and done. I mean, the healing I received, I could be good to go for the rest of my life, type of thing. Now I've done a tune-up, because a little bit of a rust buildup, but the good thing about the medicine is
change your oil.
So old me, if there was some rust buildup, drink, drugs, bad relation, just bad, I'd spiral into bad. New me can, what's a flight attendant tell you, when you get on an airliner? Hey man, if we lose cabin pressurization, put the mask on you first. You ain't good to anybody else if you're done, right? So a tune-up, and Marcus actually came up with this. He's like, we need to do let's do an annual pilgrimage, man. The initial 5 that did the medicine together, let's all go and kind of get our tune-up. So these medicines can be one and done if you want, but ain't nothing wrong with going to knock the rust off. And let me end with this. Not that you can be a good drinker, but I was a drinker, and I was a bad drinker. 8 months, up until about 8 months after doing the medicine, I couldn't even look at alcohol. It made me ill to even like think of taking a drink. So Ibogaine, if you Google it, currently is used for heroin addicts. 85% of heroin addicts in one study, up to 3 years after an Ibogaine treatment, never even looked at heroin again. So life-changing, incredible healing with these medicines. But of course, Schedule 1 drugs, right, in America. And of course, the definition of a Schedule 1 drug in this country is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction. That's the physical definition of a cigarette and alcohol. The things will kill you, and they no therapeutic use, right? But these medicines, they're actually anti-addictive, right? The more you do, they don't work, right? That's why if you've people who microdose, they do like 4 days on, 3 days off, or you can't keep doing them because they don't work, right? God's a smart pharmacologist. You can't keep hitting this stuff. And so they're anti-addictive, and it was the most therapeutic thing I've done in my life. So it's the exact opposite definition of a Schedule 1 drug. But obviously in this country, the government inverse labels things, right? The Inflation Reduction Act caused inflation, right? We can't define a woman, or, it's obscene. So these medicines, so much potential healing capabilities in these medicines that I came home and I said, this is the way. No Fallen Heroes Foundation. A veteran should not have to come out of pocket to heal. Healing should be free. Technically, healing is free. You can grow mushrooms in your backyard or your home, right? And Iboga is a root from Gabon, Africa. So God, and if that word freaks you out, put a different word in. Creator, divine, truth. I prefer to use the word God. God put all these things on this planet for us to heal. You walk through the Amazon, a medicine woman can point to something that can heal whatever the hell's wrong with you. So, the number one reason these medicines are illegal clearly is because of big pharma. It is the biggest threat in the world to these pharmaceutical companies is, because Marcus told me, he's like, Whiz, I was on 15 meds, 5 to wake up, 5 to go to, 5 for lunch and 5 to go to bed. He hasn't taken a med since we did the treatment. So these medicines can be, one and done as far as healing, and also maybe even it like I said, it gives you a clean piece of paper, man. I came home and I couldn't, now I can, tonight I have a nice dinner. I'll have a nice steak and maybe a glass of wine with my ribeye type of thing. But old me, a glass of wine was the bottle. And those days are over with. I'm really happy to say. So that was a very long answer to your short question, but that's kind of who I am and what's going on, man.
Yeah. There's a lot going on there, right? Wow. What a story. Yep. I appreciate you sharing all of that.
It ain't over yet either, too. We got a lot of work to do.
Like you said, it's the executive summary, right? Yeah, Ibogaine, prior to being a Schedule 1 medication, the brand name for it was Endabuse, because they're always real clever about naming pharmaceuticals. One word, Endabuse, and then it was it was made, Schedule 1 and has no therapeutic applications. And I'm glad that there's some work being done right here in my home state, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, around trying to fund some of the research on some of those sorts of things. I'm pretty proud
the hearing you guys had, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, was awesome. You're leading the way. So Colorado, Oregon, and Kentucky, man, leading the way. So keep up the good work.
Away from the coast. We're going to draw you in somehow away from the coast, my friend, here at least once in a while. If you're going to go to Colorado at the end of October, I think that's great. Yes. Honestly, if you're willing, I'd scrap the other 4 questions, and I'd love to hear, like you said, you'd be willing to dig in a little bit more to your experience in Mexico. And to the degree that you're comfortable talking about that, I'd love to just spend whatever time we have left hearing about that. Would you be willing to? Yeah,
man. Yeah. So, for folks that are interested, so Iboga is the root, right? There are many people that believe, Garden of Eden type of thing. It's the tree of knowledge, and there's a great book. It's just out of reach with all my other great books over there. It's called The Immortality Key. Before
Ryan Murescu. Yeah,
there you go, man.
So super interesting.
Yeah, before Christianity came along and kind of doomed a lot of things. First of all, women were the medicine women and the priests, and it was psychedelics, folks. The Greeks, it was all psychedelics, right? You could communicate with whatever that thing you choose to call it, God or whatever, right? So Iboga is the root. And then it's got like 13, 14 alkaloids in it. One of the alkaloids that they can pull out is called Ibogaine. And Ibogaine is like a global thermonuclear bomb of healing. So Friday night, you get down there, you do your welcome aboard brief, and we kind of do a fire ceremony where you put what you write down what you want to get rid of and what you want to manifest, throw it into the fire type of thing. And so we took the Ibogaine, and it took, I don't know, man, 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I remember laying on bed, and we're all in one big room. We're all in like a big master bedroom in a beautiful home in Mexico overlooking the Pacific. So, I mean, it's literally out of central casting what this place looked like. And part of the brief, they said, the onset might sound like bees. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't get that. So I'm lying there, and about 45-minute point.
Makes me think of a Candyman movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the bees show up before he does.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it wasn't that. So I just start, and you got eye shades. So I got my eye shades on, and man, there's buzzing, right? And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I get what they're talking about with bees. But it wasn't, I just remember going, I am vibrating. Holy shit. It's not bees. I'm like vibrating. I remember lifting up my eye shades and looking at my hand because I thought it was shaking, right? My whole body was shaking. I wasn't moving at all. So I put my eye shades back down, and I'm like, wait a minute. Because the buzzing like increased, and then it stopped, and then I just gently got airborne. To me, it was energy. It was frequency. It was like, I'm old enough to remember the old time TVs, man, with static. This medicine went into my body and went everywhere and had to tune me in to whatever frequency that the universe was on. And once it found it, it stopped. And then I went. And it's hard to, I say I'll break it up into halves, but it might have been 3/4 or a quarter, whatever. But the first
12
half,
halves.
yeah, exactly. The first half, so to speak, was a brief. At this point, I really hadn't been introduced to what the thing was, but whatever the thing was, I got a tour. I remember getting home and debriefing Susie, my wife, and I said, I don't have to travel anywhere. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I've seen everything. The first half of the Ibogaine was a tour. It was almost like, check this out. Look at the beauty. Look at not just this planet, man, the universe. I saw everything. I've never seen beauty as much as this. I mean, a beetle on a leaf in Norway to whatever, the mountains. It was a brief of look at everything, right? And that was just, I have no words to describe that. And then that kind of ended, and I'm in space, right? It's comfortable. I'm not like floating, lost in space type of thing. I'm just kind of there. And I'm like, wow, look at this. And then all of a sudden, this big ass, brilliant white light up, kind of upper right type of thing. I'm like, and I was ashamed to look at it. I actually was like, intuitively, I'm like, oh boy, I'm pretty sure I know what that is, right? And I just kind of remember, and there was no words. It was all energy. I got answers to everything. There was communication, but there was no like voice. And I remember looking at this, and it was, and just even looking at this light, it was nothing but love and energy, and just it was home, right? And I remember asking him like, "Are you God?" And I got the answer, yes. From
hello, God, it's me, Margaret.
Exactly. And I just remember getting that yes, and I just kind of like exploded into it. It felt like love, light, and energy. And then after I collected myself and came back, I'm like, doubting Whiz, right? Doubting Thomas. I go, can you, I needed proof. I'm like, can you give me, as if I needed proof. I go, can you give me a sign? And I'm telling you, bro, right around this big, massive white, in cursive writing, the word sign appeared and disappeared a couple times. I'm like, oh my God, holy shit. I was like, not only is it God, but my God's got a sense of humor. So it was,
Can give you a real literal sign for you here, bud.
It was a literal in cursive writing around that light.
It knew you could read cursive at least. It wasn't
exactly
like block letters.
Yeah. Today's kids would have been screwed. So I was blown away. And then, of course, it's funny because I kind of get into this little bit of a loop with God. I said, well, where you been? And it was all love the entire time. It was like, I've always been. Where have you been, my son? Type of thing. And I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. But then
just reflective question, right?
Yeah, I'm like,
thanks,
dude. I appreciate
or something.
That.
Like, oh yeah,
yeah. I'm like, I'm sitting right here, man. I didn't need that. So I get stuck in this loop with God. I go, wait, what do you mean? He's like, I have always been, and I will always be. And I'm like, whoa, who made you? Gentle, loving response again. I have always been, and I will always be. And again, typical me, I'm like, no, dude, I get that part, but who made you? You had to have. And God gently just kind of took me and lifted me up, and I exploded into forever. I felt forever.
Huh.
And I knew exactly what it meant. And forever is now, right? Our time is our human kind. We made all this bullshit up. God showed me that the only instant is now, and that lasts forever.
Yeah.
It answered a question that I have had for a very long time about my sister and my father. I always wondered if they're bored, right? Are they, are they sitting in heaven?
That's like the best question about heaven, right? That's everybody's question is like, oh yeah, harps and angel wings.
Yeah.
And,
like, do they sit there and look at their commercial? Watch? Yeah. Are they sitting there going,
what are they doing?
Yeah, man, it's been a while. Where's everybody? Or, this is hello. And the answer is no, man. I felt it. I felt what forever meant. So after, our little Q&A back and forth, that's when God kind of took me under his arm, and it literally was like a camera. We just saw my life, my childhood, my present, the future. Everything was cleaned. I got to see experiences. Unfortunately, after my sister died, there was some sexual trauma I suffered. Everything I got to look at from a sitting with the man, and it was cleansed, all of this stuff. And some of the stupid shit I had done in my life, I begged for forgiveness. I was on my knees, and God just kind of, not that God can shrug, God kind of looked at me and said, you are forgiven, my son. I do not make imperfect things. You're perfect the way you are. But if you need this, here. And man, it was a washing, a cleansing, 5 years ago, if I heard me use this phrase, I'd kick my own ass. But I was born again. It literally gave me a clean piece of paper. It took 52 years of regret, shame, drugs, alcohol, and it washed it away. And it was incredible. So seeing, like I said, my sister, my father, seeing the childhood, seeing all these type of traumas from a different point of view was incredibly healing to me. And it was interesting because, some of the other guys I was with, JT or Marcus, they were kind of in it. And it sounded, at various points, like these guys were getting cut in half by a saw, right? I mean, they were in it. And I was like, God, are you going to like kick me? And a couple of them were purging, right? They don't call it, getting sick, right? They call it a purge. Right. And I remember it at one point just lying there like, I'm like, I got to help these guys. And you can barely move. One of the biggest decisions I made in my life was like trying to roll on my side at one point. It took like 5 hours just to kind of move.
Taser training.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember lying there going, I got to help these guys, like an aviator. These are my ground buddies and they're in trouble. I got to help. They sound like they're in trouble. I remember God looking at me like, Matthew, they're getting exactly what they need, son. Let's worry about you. Right. And I'm like, but, and God again, gently just kind of would pull. And he's like, trust me, they're getting exactly what they need. Let's go. And then we'd go off. And then, of course, the next day, I'm like, JT or Marcus, I'm like, you good? And they're like, never better. I'm like, you sounded like you were in it last night. Like, or the purging or stuff like that. And they're like, dude, I didn't purge. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I was there. And he's like, no. I remember,
looking to get you all on here and have you argue it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that would definitely be
fun. Hear
the
other side of the story. What's it like to be in it? Yeah.
Well,
get the pilot perspective and then the Navy SEAL and the JTAC perspective. Because it's all going to be different, right?
Well, you need to hear my 5-MEO experience from the way JT told it, because he was on the other side of that, and he heard it because. But anyway,
lay it on me.
Yeah. So the next day, so you get a gray day, right? You gotta, I was never a journal guy. I'm like, people who write journals are weird. I'm like, now I'm that guy, because they're like, just write down what happened, even if you don't understand it or know what happened, just kind of write it down. And months later, or even years later, I go back to the day and read stuff. I'm like, wow, it makes sense. So Sunday, we do 5-MEO DMT, right? It's the venom of the desert, the Sonoran toad. And they kept us, it's a big house. So like Marcus went first. He's all the way upstairs and we're like in the basement. And now I know why they keep you really separated, because of me, right? So I'm second to go. And, we go into this room and it's beautiful. Like I said, overlooking the Pacific, and just a bed in the middle of the floor. And, I was in there with another Navy SEAL who was holding space, and then my guide, and obviously the doctor who, and the mission within, they have 2 nurses there throughout the night. They have a cardiologist. You're hooked up to an EKG. I mean, it's half spiritual, half clinical, right? So, man, I'm sitting there Indian style, if you can say that, or cross-legged. They eye shades on your forehead. They're like, once you take it in, we'll gently slide these down and kind of lay you back. And I'm like, all right. And man, I took in the 5-MEO DMT, and they're like, count out, count down from 10 or then count up. I'm like, okay. And man, as I start to lean back, I just kind of keep going. There ain't no bed. I just, in the blink, it's like Star Wars, man. When they make a jump to hyperspace, I went from 0 to infinity. I exploded, and, I'm still a pilot right now, and you never want to hear your pilot say this to you, but I will tell you, I have 0 fear of death anymore. I absolutely, and it's interesting because I guarantee you she's going to listen to this and she's going to give me shit again. But our director of medicine operations, she's like, please avoid telling people you died. I'm like, when I did that 5-MEO,
tell the truth.
When I did that 5-MEO DMT, man, I have 0 fear of death. I know when I take my last breath exactly what's going to happen. And it's, I have this motto that says you've survived every one of your worst days. And to me, the worst day that I don't survive is going to end up being the most incredible day, because I just physically, everything just exploded into source. And, some people kind of get a little turned sideways when I talk like this, because I'm like, I became one with God. Well, first of all, we all are one with God right now. We are made in its image. But man, I was with source. I became one with source, and everything. And it was perfect. This is where I literally got the whole forever for, like, it was now. I had no sense of time. Not to get too, not to downgrade this, but it was an orgasm times infinity. It was absolutely perfection, and it was now, but it was forever, right? man, it was just absolute perfection. I was one with everything and one with God, right? But it kind of turned into an Apollo 13 moment, because whatever word you want to use, source, creator's like, all right, do you understand? Do you get this now, right? You have nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. You're perfect. Everything's great. But you can't stay. you got shit to do, right? So I remember, and I don't remember any of this. The physical things I'm going to tell you were told to me by the three people in the room. They're like, you got into the fetal position, like literally as tight into a tight little ball. Because I remember coming back, and I remember trying to fit into this imperfect vessel. But there was some shame or darkness or still some drugs or regret or whatever was in this thing that wouldn't leave. So I remember screaming at the top of my lungs. I remember that one. I hadn't yelled that loud since my father died, right? So I remember that one. And then they're like, you took a deep breath, because it wouldn't leave. Whatever was in here that was stuck wouldn't leave. And they're like, dude, you took a deeper breath, a bigger breath, and you yelled longer and louder. And they said, in the blink of an eye, you flipped. I did a forward flip in the bed. I tell you, man, I think maybe I've tried to flip twice into a pool, maybe when I was a kid. And you know, I landed on my back, and don't do that again. That was stupid. Dude, I flipped in this bed.
Huh.
I don't remember that, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember after the yells, I remember like a deep breath. And I'm like, okay, wherever I am right now, that wasn't me. And then I heard another deep breath. And I'm like, well, maybe I should do that. And I took a deep breath, and I opened my eyes, and there's three people around me, like tears in their eyes, and they look like they're terrified. And I'm like, are you guys okay? They're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, why? You know, never been better type of thing. And they're looking at me like they've seen death.
You just, like had 9 heads and were, screaming and flipping and whatever. Are you guys good?
Yeah.
You good?
You
all
good?
Right, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously at dinner later, they gave me the full debrief, and I'm like, oh, that explains the looks on your faces and everything like that. So yeah, man, it was, and they told me at dinner, they're like, do you remember one of the first things you said? I'm like, no. They're like, well, when you came out, they said, you said you can't wait to tell Susie you love her forever, because you know what forever means. And I was like, oh, wow. And then, they said you had a Braveheart moment. You looked at us and you just said the word freedom. You said freedom. Huh. I'm like, oh shit, man. Well, that's what that was. And it was funny because I came down the stairs, and JT and the other SEAL who still hadn't gone yet, we were told that this was the icing on the cake. This was like beautiful experience and stuff like that. And all they heard sitting in that living room was two
you
blood
doing MMA with yourself.
JT, I remember coming down the stairs. I give both those guys a thumbs up, and they're looking at me like, what? They had looks of terror on their face. And I guess my guide was standing behind me going down the stairs, like waving, like, no, don't say anything to Whiz, just shh, And they took me outside, and they gave me some fruit, and I'm like, wow. And they told me the story later, dinner. JT's like, yeah, we're told that this is the icing on the cake. This is the coolest thing ever. And all I hear is two blood-curdling screams, like they're hitting you in the calf with an axe. And then we hear a boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And then you come down the stairs smiling with this shit-eating grin on your face.
Cut the Achilles and flop like a fish. Who'd you leave up there?
Exactly. So it made sense, like their looks on their face when I came down the stairs. But it was without a doubt but that I will tell you, I will warn you, that's its own.
You're going to do this again annually? That's the plan?
No. So
the reunion tour?
Yeah, no. So it's interesting because some people are like, yeah, I do 5-MeO I'm like, I never want to do that again. That was a one and done for me. I have zero interest to do it again. Let me give you I did it again story real quick. So I went down with the first group of fighter pilots to do it, because this was mainly ground people, right? But since I didn't go to the airlines and went to Wall Street, I don't have an airline job. I don't have to lie to the FAA. I don't have any PTS or, so a bunch of, my bros are lying. We sent a guy down to do the medicine who's an American Airlines captain, F-16 pilot. He's like, dude, I've been in therapy for 15 years and I pay cash because I don't want Uncle Sam to have a record of it, right? So I went down with those guys and I did the 5-MeO again. And dude, it sucked. But I got exactly what I needed, meaning, and I'll use an aviation example, I could not go supersonic. I could see it. I could see like a little bit of a wall. I could see what I saw on the other side of this thing that I got the first time, perfection. But it was like I was bumping up against the sound barrier and I couldn't punch through it. And it was so frustrating. And I remember God kind of being a little loving or whatever, going, you don't need to be here, Whiz. You kind of got it, son. Right. So I was like, whoa. And my guide was awesome. Well, maybe not, because afterwards she's like, you know what? I probably should have told you this before. I'm like, told me what? She's like, well, anybody who I've worked with over the years who is doing this to try and help people, the medicine shows you everything, right? Good, bad, and otherwise. So you can obviously talk to people about it and help. I'm like, duh, that makes some pretty damn good sense. She's like, well, you kind of didn't expect it to do the exact same thing you did the first time, did you? I'm like, yeah, I kind of did. That's why I wanted to do it again. And she's like,
to ride the ride again.
That's exactly right. I'm a fighter pilot. The adrenaline rush, lay it on me type of thing. And she's like, yeah, I probably should have briefed you on that. So the second time, so now I'm done. And here's another one of those ridiculous statements that if I had heard in the past, I'd laugh at, but I'm going to tell you now that I believe. The medicine calls to you. Like it does. If you feel that or hear that, it is. If not, it's not. Don't do it if it ain't. So I learned that lesson, not necessarily the hard way, because I got what I needed. Now I can speak to that, right? But it definitely was a little frustrating not being able to go supersonic. So that was definitely an interesting part of that experience. So again, I got what I needed. Didn't get what I wanted, but that's what I needed. God, source needed to show me, like, dude, you need to start telling people this can be a one and done. You don't need to keep hitting it, so to speak. So yeah, so that was that's my toad story, a front flip in a bed. It was an exorcism. Wow. And it was well deserved and definitely well received. So but I would those are two separate experiences. I would, we're military guys. We want shit, instant gratification. We want now. Let's squeeze these two things together in a weekend. Be very, very careful. Those are two separate experiences. I'll be integrating that initial 5-MeO experience for the rest of my life, dude. I still get downloads. Yeah. I'll meditate. I'll get back to the kind of that transcendent state I felt on the medicine. So you don't need to do that. This can be a one and done. It should have been a one and done, but I didn't. But now I know I can give lessons learned. So don't feel like you need to be some sort of psychedelic tourist. There are enough veterans and first responders that we have helped that are like, dude, I got it. Wow, I'm good, and never look back. So, take my lessons learned and wisely. But and I ask you, I thank you for asking me this stuff, Doc. But I probably should have led with this instead of ending with it. This was my experience, right? Mm-hmm. The second, when I did Iboga, I had a completely different downloads. Let me share with this real quick. When I went to Costa Rica and I did Iboga, I had met one of the guides, just talked to her briefly in the day and a half before we did the medicine. So we're sitting around this fire after doing the Iboga, and across the fire circle from me is that lady. She was Dutch or something, really nice lady, but for like an hour or two that we're around the fire circle, she's like staring. I thought she was staring at me, but it looked like a little offset. And I'm kind of like, do I have a booger hanging out of my nose or my zipper down? What's going on here? And that's a whole separate podcast. I can debrief my Iboga experience, but it was almost no visuals, but which the Ibogaine was nothing but visual. It was insanity.
Mm-hmm.
But this was downloads. I got clarity on stuff like laser messages. But I bring this up because I didn't think the next morning, I kind of roll off my mattress and I go sit near that fire circle. Just, I grab my journal and I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, what was that? She came up to me. She's like, hey, I have to tell you something. I'm like, I didn't say this, but I'm like, yeah, what the hell was going on? You were staring at me. She's like, at the fire circle last night, after you took the first round of medicine, there was a male figure behind you, like standing behind you, kind of with his hands on your shoulders. And I'm like, oh my God, was that maybe my dad? I'm like, wow. And then she said, when you went to lay down on your mattress, that male figure was standing at the head of your mattress, and then a white light of love and beauty was swirling around you the entire night. She's like, I would look away, and they do a little bit of medicine to tune in. She's like, I would look away I'm like, okay, well, that's that. And she'd look back and she's like, that male figure was standing there, and that white light enveloped you the entire night. I'm like, that was my dad and that was my sister. I felt it. So I didn't think I got anything. And this lady walked up to me. She's like, dude, I got to tell you what I saw around you last night. I'm like, oh my God. It was almost like when I did the Iboga, it was almost like my check ride as an instructor. I got the feeling like, dude, we've done some heavy cleansing. It was almost like a debrief with God going, you got this. I think you've got kind of everything you need in your toolbox right now, Whiz. It wasn't Whiz, it was Matthew. It was like, you got what you need, son. You are signed off. You are now an instructor pilot. And I mean that not even close in the sense that I know shit about this stuff, man. The more I learn, the less I know. So I ain't no Shambro or whatever. I'm just telling you my experiences.
Yeah.
Because anybody who's out there running around like I'm an expert or I know, dude, run away from those people as fast as you can. So I tell people, I'm like, if you want to listen to kind of what I saw and experienced, that was me, man. Each time you're going to get served up something different and different downloads. So, sometimes I hesitate of giving my full flip in the bed shit because, I held space for some recent 5-MeO folks, and one guy just laid there and giggled. Another lady, cried a little bit and laughed. And I'm like, what the hell am I flipped in the bed. What the fuck? So every experience is different, and everything you hear about anybody's journey was their journey. That was made. I remember on the Ibogaine looking at some of the stuff going, the production values on this thing are insane. Who wrote this? Like this, you need an Oscar, man. This is this is insanity. look at the detail and everything. So everybody
looks so real.
Exactly. I'm like, this is just insane. I would, I laughed, I cried. It was better than Cats. I'd see it again and again. So, sometimes I hesitate to give my full debrief because there ain't no way in hell people are going to get anything similar. But if it helps, it's good. So mine was completely spiritual. Even JT or Marcus sounded like they were in a dogfight. It was a good dogfight, right? Because any of the purging, like they're like, dude, all I saw in me was dark and sadness and shame and regret, and it was bubbling. And God said, get rid of it, son. Don't carry it anymore. And I felt better. I'm like, dude, that's because it came out of your mouth. It was so the purging is definitely an energy release. It's not like a night of drinking and I'm getting sick. Most of the people that purge don't even know they did it, right? I knock on wood, I've never felt the need, because that's what, especially with ayahuasca, a lot of people are like, I don't want to purge. I don't like getting sick. First of all, it ain't getting sick. And second of all, I never did. In all the medicine work that I've done, I've knock on wood, I've never felt in the least bit nauseous or anything. And any of my energy release was kind of in my mind and my soul. It wasn't a physical release, but that does happen. The group of 5 fighter pilots that I took down there, just one guy was a purger. And again, the next day, his call sign's Bart. Bart was like, dude, what are you talking about getting sick? I didn't get sick. I'm like, dude, you were that guy. You were like a giraffe on ice skates, man. You were, you were all over the place. He's like, you're lying. I'm like, okay, I am. But so that, that's why I kind of
light exaggeration.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I sometimes hesitate to to brief people on stuff because if it helps give you some context or at least make you feel a little bit better, because it's interesting because people are like, oh, I did mushrooms once and I tripped out and I saw some. I'm like, well, first of all, what happened? Well, I was at a concert. I'm like, all right, strike one. It's set and setting, right? The right mindset going into the medicine and then where you are. I bring this up because people are like, oh my God, I want to see shit. So on Ibogaine and Iboga, it ain't hallucinatory. There ain't nothing. Ibogaine is ayahuasca. I've never done it, but I hear it's an external, like you and everything in Ibogaine, everybody we've helped or talked to that was an internal personal journey. Like I didn't see, during that tour, we talked about the first half of the Ibogaine when I saw a tour of the world, the universe, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
At one point, like a red face kind of came up and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Now it's going to be, fucking demons and shit.
Yeah.
And it went away as soon as I leaned into it. I'm like, what the and I leaned into it and it went away. And I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. And then it came back like it almost hurt me. And I'm like, that doesn't scare me. And it went away even quicker. And I got the message like, dude, there ain't nothing scary at all. Right. There's I want to get this quote right, but at the beginning or, this book, A Course in Miracles, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And that, so if anybody's sitting there like, I'm afraid of what I'll see, don't. It ain't nothing popping up out of the blue. No Jason with a chainsaw type of thing. I've never heard of that happening with anybody. It's all stuff that you're carrying. So I think I answered that. another long answer to one of your very short questions.
No, it's a very thorough answer. Like you said, you hesitate sometimes, and I understand why. But I'm incredibly grateful that you were willing not to hesitate and to open up and to share some of those things on the podcast today.
You got it, man. Like I said, it was personal to me, but it's really interesting because this medicine, folks. Most people, I'd say almost everybody that's done Ibogaine or Iboga kind of has it broken in half, like I talked about. The visualization phase. It's almost like the medicine goes in and goes, all right, I've looked into everything. We took an inventory inside this person. Let's give them the brief. Let's show them around. And then let's dig into them. It's incredible. You would think it's a fucking plant, man. How's it? Everybody who I've worked with that have done that, it's kind of broken into two. I don't know if it's a half or not. Maybe that was 10 seconds long and then the rest is 14 hours. I don't know, but I'm just saying it's pretty interesting how this medicine, the Iboga and the Ibogaine, kind of breaks it up and gives you a little tour of how special everything is and incredible. And then it gets to work on you, which is pretty cool. Real quick, the NFL player we went down with, I rode in the car with him from San Diego to Mexico because you take a little convoy, like 3 or 4 cars. And I swear, man, I was sitting next to death. Big dude. He's a big dude, man. Big guy. Yeah. He just looked dead. It's a horrible CTE. Let me fast forward like a year later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
A year later, I'm in San Diego at a fundraiser. And I walk past this massive guy and he throws me an elbow. I'm like, oh, shit. Now I'm in a fight. It was him. I walked
it was death
right past him. No, it was an angel, man. He was completely
transformed.
Different. One of the Navy SEALs, can't name names with this one, but he's like, dude, look at this. This was his brain scans from the VA. Dark, black, gray. He's like, look at this, dude. They almost killed me from radiation poisoning because 3 months after the medicine, it was white. And the techs and the doc were like, something's wrong with the machine or these are somebody else's. He's like, that's me. Stop. Yeah. It was white. So the neuroplasticity of these medicines to be able to go in and reconnect broken synapses or neurons or whatever, it's pretty damn cool that these medicines can go in and start potentially repairing some damage. There are so many great studies coming, whether it's with dementia or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, with these medicines being able to go in and kind of regrow some stuff, which is just absolutely incredible. So this is it. If this is the rest of my life, I'm never going to work a day in my life. The No Fallen Heroes Foundation, our mission objective is to heal, not just, the closest alligators to my boat are my squadron mates, right? Veterans and first responders, and obviously their family members serve, right? But the mission objective is to heal everybody. And let me clear this up too. These medicines are not for everybody, right? You can meditate and heal. You can walk on the beach. You can climb the top of Mount Everest, whatever floats your boat. There are so many different potential healing modalities out there. But if potentially you got some radical trauma or need some radical healing, like I said, if this calls to you, then maybe listen. You can always reach out to me, or I'll hook you up with our director of medicine operations, and we can talk to you about it. But don't, I definitely don't want to pull a Timothy O'Leary, right? We need to put LSD in the water. I get what he was saying, right? I tell people, I'm like, if I could kidnap Zelensky and Putin and throw them on some Ibogaine, they'd be best friends at the end of that. Because old me, 5 years ago, I would have swam across the Atlantic by now to kill as many Russians as physically possible. Now I'm like, stop, man. Stop. What are you doing? Right? So these medicines can also, maybe that's why they're also illegal, because they can turn warriors into peacemakers. It reframed. I see souls now, man. I see perfect souls. I said this on my podcast recently, probably not too popular, but it's the truth. You want to reduce crime? You want to reduce recidivist, people on parole going back to jail? Criminals need to do the medicine, man. I'm telling you, criminals need to do the medicine, or parolees, or anything like that. When you can get these people back to looking at themselves as a perfect soul underneath this bullshit, you're not your shell. You're under your shell, right? And your under your shell is perfect. So yeah, that's another. That might be a separate podcast, but yeah, there are so many people that could benefit from this. But again, it ain't for everybody, man. It definitely is something you need to. I treated this as a combat mission, man. I briefed, I studied, you write intentions down. I went into the medicine with 5 intentions and also 5 questions, right? So you can do stuff. So it's a deadly serious undertaking. Definitely not to be taken lightly, but it ain't for everybody. So don't feel bad if you're like, this ain't calling me. No, then hopefully you chuckle a little bit. But for other people, if it's something that might resonate with you, give me a call.
Man, that was just like the most thorough rundown on psychedelics and psychedelic-assisted therapy, particularly Ibogaine, Iboga, and 5-MeO-DMT. Man, I'm super grateful you were willing to share that story. You got any final thoughts for the audience?
No, man, it's interesting because I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme, right? Because I got home and I'm like, I'm done. I gotta tell people. I gotta help people find this. Same thing happens. Just about everybody that comes back, like, holy shit, dude. It's a Ponzi scheme. In a good way. You just want to tell people. And I think that's also intuitively how God and the medicine wants us to be. It's interesting that, thank God for Colorado and Oregon, but Uncle Sam's like, we need 10 years of studies and beakers and dudes in lab coats and slide rules. I'm like, you talk to a shaman in the middle of Brazil, they're like, what? It's like the West is kind of, we found these things and we need to study them. It's like, they've been used for thousands and thousands of years, and here we come. Yeah. Here we come with, you need to get certified in the state of Colorado. I'm like, certified? Some medicine lady's probably like, what? Oh, and you need to pay a licensing fee. Okay.
They called it Operation Warp Speed, right? It took 9 months and $18 billion to get the COVID vaccines researched and through the same sort of safety and efficacy development processes that we use for all of the other vaccines that we give to newborns on the planet to figure all of those sorts of things out, because we had the national will behind it. So my proposal is that we come up with an Operation Ludicrous Speed to address the pandemic of trauma and opioid addiction and suicide and all of those sorts of things. Like, if we had the national will, we certainly have the imaginary debt-based dollars to put behind running things through the sorts of clinical trials that will give people the evidence that they need. Like, I understand the need for evidence as a clinician. I still have questions around the safety and efficacy of what's been published on Ibogaine, right?
Of course.
And your story's beautiful and it's thorough, and I still have questions at the end of the day before I would write a prescription for it, right? So I want to see those studies, but I want them done yesterday. You know what I mean?
Well,
we need to go plaid on the research.
I'm telling you, man. So, I get extremely frustrated every time I go to DC and leave because it's a shit show. But whenever there's a mass shooting in America, what's the knee-jerk reaction out of some politicians? We need to ban guns. Why? If it saves just one life, Whiz, wouldn't it be worth it? I'm like, perfect. Let me take that argument, delete one life, and put in veterans' life. Why don't we make these emergency available to veterans? Because if it can save just one veteran's life, wouldn't it be worth it? But clearly we're kind of the ragged refuse and tossed aside. But I guarantee, I've been on retreats, or if I'm not on a retreat, I get a text or phone call, and it makes me cry when I get these. Whiz, I don't want to kill myself anymore. I can't even put into words, first of all, how that feels. But folks, the generational trauma, the generational hand grenade of a suicide is you can't fathom it. Saving one person, wouldn't it be worth it? But again, it ain't gun violence, so it's not, sexy and politically expedient. So if we can save just one veteran's life, wouldn't it be worth it? And I don't care what number you use, 17, 22, 44. How about one? One veteran per day is way too many. So that's my mission objective, is to bring that number down to zero. I tell people the mission objective
to zero.
Yeah. The mission objective of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation is to not be in existence. I tell people I want to be gone in 2 to 3 years. I want the No Fallen Heroes Foundation to cease to exist. I shouldn't be doing this. We should be taking care of the people that served. Get rid of my foundation. I don't need it. I don't want it. It's needed now, but I don't want it to be needed.
Well, I appreciate those final thoughts. They're pretty thorough, and the logic there is undeniable, I think.
You got it, my brother. Well, I mean, we're talking about our country. Today's logic seems to have logic has left the building, but my mission objective is to bring logic back and to save as many lives as we can. So I appreciate having the opportunity to talk, my brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Doc out.